Chapter 1. The Light Within. Well, there it is. No turning back now. The volcano was massive, so tall that its peak would not be visible through the smoke and ash that contaminated his every breath if it weren't for the glow from the inferno at its peak. The light from the molten lava illuminated his golden skin, and though he'd never been more determined, the scrapes and wear on his body told the tale of a journey that had gone on for so long even he had a hard time remembering where it had actually begun. Slung over his shoulder was a leather satchel, pinned so tightly to his body that it was as if he was worried the breeze itself would try and abscond with its contents, given half a chance. As he arrived at the base of the mountain, he discovered the path he'd been following abruptly ended at a deep chasm. He scanned the ruin for a way around and saw a weathered stone bridge, naturally formed but not ideal for crossing. It reached across the chasm like a stone finger, uneven and frighteningly narrow at spots, but seemingly pointing him in the direction he needed to go. As he neared the other side, small, strange lights began to appear in the shadows formed by the piles of boulders at the base of the mountain. He realized that he was not the first to reach the volcano, as he had hoped, and a sinking feeling began to wash over him. If he hadn't been so painfully aware of the danger that followed the appearance of these lights, he would almost describe them as beautiful. A vibrant luminescence that one by one transitioned from blue to purple to a menacing scarlet red. He recognized that glow immediately. The Fang were here. The Fang were once normal dinosaurs, but not anymore. Now they were cybernetic soldiers, easily recognized by their metallic headpieces and the blinking lights fused into their skin that seemed to remove all fear from their minds and coordinate their movements. He could not focus on the unimaginable wrong that had brought these creatures into existence. All that mattered now is that they would not hesitate, nor would they relent until they got what they wanted. The moment he stepped off the bridge, the cybernetic dinos leapt from the shadows. The Golden Rex, though exhausted, was prepared. Through the months of hardship that led him to this point, he had encountered several of these minions. He reflexively dodged the first blow directed at his head, stepping aside at the last minute to ensure all the creature's weight and momentum were committed to the punch. He watched as the fist passed by his head, almost as if it were in slow motion, missing by mere millimeters. In a blink, he spun with the creature, whipping around to land a devastating counter-strike to its back with his tail. The force of the impact, combined with the momentum of the off-target strike, sent the cybernetic dino flying into the chasm behind him. In one fluid movement, he dealt with his foe and positioned himself to be ready for the next. The remaining two cyborgs, seeing what had just happened to their partner, exchanged a glance, then attacked. They charged towards the Rex at opposing angles in a vain attempt to surround him. The Fang's movements were fast and frighteningly coordinated. An onslaught of fury rained down on him. With his tail, he whipped the one on his left in the chest, stunning it. Simultaneously, he reached out to grab the punch directed at his head from the Fang attacking on his right. Guiding its arm, he used his assailant's momentum as a weapon, hurling it into the stunned cyborg with such force that they were both sent tumbling backwards into a pile of boulders that came crashing down on top of them. After taking a moment to catch his breath, he pressed on. Exhausted, he leapt from stone to stone, crossing another large flow of lava like a river of fire pouring down the mountain. Eventually, the angle was too steep at the base to continue walking. There's only one way to go now, he thought, so he began to climb. As he scaled the mountain, he suddenly became aware of movement. 3 small robotic dinosaurs blazed towards him with incredible speed. "Raptroids. Wonderful," he muttered sarcastically to himself. Desperately hanging on to the rock, he braced himself against the ambush. The first attacker he was able to knock off the cliff with his tail, the second with his free hand, but the third was able to latch onto his arm as he reached up to re-secure himself to the cliff face. The Raptroid's razor-sharp teeth sunk into his arm. He roared in pain, slamming the Raptroid against the stone until it could no longer hang on and was flung into the darkness below. No way to dress the wound here, he thought. He'd have to reach the top. A thunderclap exploded in his ears. A nebulous, unnatural light appeared above his head as tentacles of electricity reached out over the ledge, leaving scars of molten stone in their wake. He knew that light, and for the first time in a long time, he felt afraid. He hesitated momentarily, but there was no getting around it. He had to keep climbing. He had to face it. As he neared the ledge, he discovered he was out of handholds. The knobs and cracks that formed the cliff to this point were gone, and the remaining stretch of cliff face was as smooth as glass. Giving what he felt must be the last of his strength, he sprang upward, grabbing the ledge with the tips of his fingers, attached to arms never designed to support this kind of weight. Just as he began to pull himself up, a foot appeared, crushing his clawed fingers with such force he wondered if they'd ever work again. A head peered over the cliff face, looking down at the wincing T-Rex. A bionic Dilophosaurus stood over him. It was more machine than dinosaur now, head slowly tilting to the left with a menacing grin. This creature was known to the Golden Rex. They had crossed paths before on his journey to the mountain, and he had barely escaped with his life. The Dilo brought its head down towards the Rex, close enough to feel its breath, if it had any. Instead, it let out a deep, emotionless growl.
"Give me the stone."
"If I fall, it will be lost," the Rex said, struggling to speak from exhaustion and the excruciating pain pulsing down his wounded arm from his crushed fingers. Seeming to consider what the Rex had said, the Dilo tilted its head slowly back to center. A metal frill unfurled around the Dilo's head as it let out a frustrated scream. The robot's frill channeled the sound waves in a way that made the Rex feel like his head was going to split into two. The weaponized beam of frequencies seemed to rip through his entire body. Low frequencies hit him like a punch in the guts, while simultaneously the higher tones pierced his skin like 1,000 needles all at once. The only thing that prevented the Golden Rex from being shot off the mountain was the foot pinning his hand to the stone. He dangled from the cliffside, one hand pinned on the ledge and the other grasping the cloth satchel that contained the egg-shaped stone the Dilo wanted so badly. Seeing that the stone was at risk of being lost down the mountainside, the Dilo grabbed the stunned Rex and, as if he was weightless, hurled him towards the mountain. He slammed against the wall of the cliff and slumped to the ground, his mind trying to process the shock of the impact. His surroundings were a blur, the world spinning as his vision struggled to return. He heard the sound first. Then his eyes were able to focus on the crystal egg that had fallen out of his satchel, rolling on the ground, the sound of glass on stone ringing in his ears as it came to rest right in the middle of the ledge between him and everything he stood against. The robot's head darted unnaturally. Its artificially illuminated red eyes seemed to get even brighter as the menacing smile returned. The Dilo lunged. Time seemed to stop. The months of travel and hardship, the years of struggle and adversity, all seemed present in the Rex's mind. He saw the thousands of faces of those who had helped him along the way, who were counting on him. The pain this creature and others like it had caused and sought to cause seemed to hit him in a flood of panic, fear, and despair. He was about to fail, After everything he'd been through, he was right at the end, and he was going to fail. His body was spent, his arms and legs were throbbing, resisting any call to action his will might want to send. He wasn't even sure he still had fingers on his hand, and his head still rang from the sound of that creature's scream, a sound he feared he might hear forever, though forever might not be very long at all, the way things were going. All of these thoughts, memories, the fear, panic, and pain seemed to build up at once and morph into one pure emotion: rage. Still in the air, mid-leap, the Dilophosaurus's eyes were drawn to the Rex. The Rex's eyes began to shine in a radiant, blinding, pure white light. At the same time, the stone, made from the most exquisite sunstone, a mix of clear quartz, copper schiller, with vibrant opal-like specks that reflected light into the entire color spectrum, began to radiate prismatic beams of light, shooting out in all directions. The Rex moved towards the egg-shaped stone in a way that should not have been possible, as if propelled by a force that could not be seen. In an instant, the Rex was in front of the stone, kneeling on one knee, eyes locked on his inbound foe. He glared at the robot, intense, determined, unafraid. He reached out toward the stone, allowing his palm to come gently to rest on its surface, beams of light radiating between his fingers. A pulse of electricity burst out from the egg. There was a huge explosion of blinding, pure white energy, so bright that there was no mountain, no sound, no pain, nothing. Just white light. Come on, Auri. You've got to open your eyes. You can do it. We prepared for this.